Staff Sergeant Zoe Reeves was about to attempt what military experts called impossible, a precision shot from over 2 miles away after her male counterpart had failed from half that distance. What happened next would rewrite the record books and prove that sometimes the most unlikely person becomes the hero when it matters most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of northern Syria as Staff Sergeant Zoe Reeves adjusted her spotting scope for what felt like the 100th time. Through the haze of desert heat, she could see their target, a high-value terrorist leader meeting with his lieutenants in a compound roughly 1,200 meters away. It should have been a routine mission for the elite sniper team from Fort Carson's 10th Special Forces Group. Beside her, Sergeant First Class Cameron Torres lay prone behind his Barrett M82 .50 caliber rifle, his breathing steady and controlled. Cameron was the team's primary sniper, a role he'd held for 3 years and one he wore like a badge of honor. His service record was impressive: 27 confirmed kills, multiple commendations, and a reputation that preceded him throughout the special operations community. Zoe, as the spotter, was responsible for wind calculations, range estimation, and target identification. It was a crucial role, but one that kept her behind the scope rather than behind the trigger. She'd been pushing for sniper training for over a year, but Cameron and their team leader, Master Sergeant Tyler Brooks, had consistently blocked her requests. Women don't have the physical strength for long-range precision shooting. The recoil management alone would throw off your accuracy. You're valuable as a spotter. Stick to what you're good at. Now, lying in the Syrian desert with the mission clock ticking, Zoe fed Cameron the environmental data with practiced precision. Wind speed 4 miles per hour, direction southeast. Target range confirmed at 1,247 meters. Humidity at 62%, temperature rising to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Cameron made minute adjustments to his scope, his movements deliberate and confident. This was supposed to be a textbook operation: neutralize the target, extract without detection, and return to base before sunset. Intelligence had confirmed that their target, a bomb maker responsible for dozens of coalition casualties, would be at this location for exactly 30 minutes before moving to a more secure compound deeper in enemy territory. "Target acquired," Cameron whispered into his throat microphone. "Clear shot, minimal wind interference. Taking the shot in 10 seconds. Zoe watched through her scope as Cameron controlled his breathing, his finger moving to the trigger. She could see their target clearly: a bearded man in traditional robes standing near a white SUV, completely unaware that his life hung in the balance of a precisely calculated bullet trajectory. "Shot," Cameron announced. The massive rifle bucked against his shoulder, the sound echoing across the desert landscape. Zoe immediately shifted her scope to observe the impact, expecting to see their target down and the mission complete. Instead, she watched in horror as the bullet struck the ground 3 feet to the left of their target, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. The compound erupted into chaos. Armed guards scattered in all directions, shouting orders and scanning the surrounding hills for the source of the attack. Their high-value target, very much alive and now very much aware he was being hunted, dove behind the SUV and began barking commands to his security detail. "Negative hit," Zoe reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Cameron's face had gone pale behind his rifle scope. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Perfect conditions, perfect range calculation. I've made that shot 100 times. But there was no time for analysis. The sound of the gunshot had alerted every hostile in the area to their presence. Already, Zoe could see armed figures moving methodically up the hillside toward their concealed position. Their target had disappeared into the compound, along with any chance of completing the mission. Cameron was staring at his rifle as if it had personally betrayed him. "I don't understand," he said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Everything was perfect. Range, wind, humidity, all calculated correctly. The shot should have been dead center. "Cameron, we need to move," Zoe urged, shouldering her pack and checking her M4 carbine. "Those fighters will be in range within 5 minutes." But Cameron seemed frozen, still staring at his rifle with a mixture of confusion and horror. The psychological impact of the missed shot was devastating, not just because it meant mission failure, but because it shattered his fundamental belief in his own abilities. The sound of gunfire erupted from below as the hostile forces began laying down suppressive fire in their general direction. Bullets whined overhead, striking rocks and sending fragments flying around their position. "Cameron," Zoe shouted, grabbing his shoulder, "we need to displace now." Finally, he snapped out of his shock and began gathering his equipment. But as they prepared to bound toward their secondary position, Zoe could see something had fundamentally changed in her partner. The confident, almost arrogant sniper who had started the mission was gone, replaced by a man whose entire world had just been turned upside down by a single missed shot. As they began their tactical withdrawal under increasing enemy fire, neither of them could have predicted that this mission failure would set in motion events that would ultimately lead to the longest confirmed kill shot in military history, and that the person behind the trigger wouldn't be Cameron Torres. The extraction helicopter's rotors grew louder in the distance, but the real storm was just beginning. The debriefing room at Forward Operating Base Phoenix felt like a courtroom, and Zoe Reeves knew she was about to be tried for crimes she didn't commit. The sterile white walls seemed to close in as she sat across from Colonel Rebecca Stone, the base commander whose reputation for thoroughness was matched only by her intolerance for operational failures. Cameron Torres sat beside her, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a hollow stare that hadn't left his face since the failed mission 12 hours earlier. Master Sergeant Tyler Brooks occupied the chair directly across from them, his arms crossed, and his expression suggesting he'd already reached his conclusions about what had gone wrong. "Let's start from the beginning," Colonel Stone said, her voice crisp and professional. "Sergeant Torres, walk me through your shot sequence, every detail." Cameron's hands trembled slightly as he opened his mission notes. "Ma'am, conditions were optimal. Range was 1,247 meters, confirmed by both my rangefinder and Sergeant Reeves' calculations. Wind was minimal, 4 miles per hour from the southeast, humidity at 62%, temperature 95 degrees Fahrenheit." He paused, swallowing hard. "I followed standard procedure, controlled breathing, proper sight alignment, smooth trigger pull. The fundamentals were perfect. The shot should have been dead center." Colonel Stone's penetrating gaze shifted to Zoe. "Sergeant Reeves, as the spotter, you're responsible for environmental calculations and target confirmation. Are you confident in the data you provided?" "Yes, ma'am," Zoe replied without hesitation. "I double-checked all calculations using both digital and manual methods. Range estimation was confirmed through multiple readings. Wind calls were accurate based on mirage observation and vegetation movement in the target area." Master Sergeant Brooks leaned forward, his voice carrying a skeptical edge. "Colonel, with respect, I think we need to consider all possibilities here. Sergeant Reeves has been pushing for sniper training for months. Maybe her focus wasn't entirely on supporting Sergeant Torres." Zoe felt her jaw clenched, but she kept her voice level. "Master Sergeant, are you suggesting I deliberately sabotaged the mission?" "I'm suggesting that maybe your attention was divided," Brooks replied. "When a spotter starts thinking about being behind the trigger instead of behind the scope, mistakes happen." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Zoe could see Cameron shift uncomfortably beside her, but he remained silent. His failure was being overshadowed by questions about her competence, and she could tell part of him was relieved to have someone else in the crosshairs. Colonel Stone raised a hand to silence any response. "Master Sergeant Brooks, that's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence to support it?" Brooks pulled out a tablet and scrolled through several documents. "Colonel Sergeant Reeves has submitted 3 formal requests for sniper school in the past 14 months. Each time she's been denied due to concerns about her physical readiness and her value in her current role. I believe her desire to transition away from spotting duties may have affected her performance." "That's ridiculous," Zoe said, her composure finally cracking. "My record as a spotter is flawless. 17 successful missions without a single calculation error. My evaluations consistently rate me as exceptional in accuracy and reliability. Until yesterday. Yesterday, when the pressure was highest and the stakes were greatest, something went wrong. Either Sergeant Torres suddenly forgot how to shoot after 3 years of perfect performance, or the supporting data he relied on was flawed." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Zoe could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. In the military's culture of accountability, someone had to be responsible for failure, and it was becoming clear that Brooks intended for that someone to be her. Cameron finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The calculations were correct. Everyone turned to look at him. I've been thinking about it all night. The math was perfect. The environmental conditions were exactly as Zoe reported them. Then how do you explain the miss? Cameron was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe it was equipment failure. Maybe the rifle was bumped during movement and the scope was off. Maybe it was just one of those things that happens in combat, variables we can't control or predict. But Zoe could see something else in Cameron's eyes, something he wasn't saying. She'd worked with him long enough to read his expressions, and what she saw wasn't confusion or uncertainty, it was fear. Fear that his failure wasn't a fluke or equipment malfunction, but something deeper, a crack in the confidence that had defined him as a soldier. Master Sergeant Brooks wasn't satisfied with ambiguous explanations. Colonel, I recommend we conduct a full investigation into mission procedures and personnel readiness. If there are issues with our spotting protocols or personnel reliability, we need to identify and correct them before our next operation. The translation was clear. Brooks wanted Zoe investigated, questioned, and potentially removed from the sniper team. Her reputation, her career, and her dreams of advancing to sniper training were all being threatened because Cameron missed a shot.
Colonel Stone closed the mission file and looked directly at Zoe. Sergeant Reeves, you're temporarily reassigned to administrative duties, pending a full review of yesterday's operation. Master Sergeant Brooks will conduct interviews with all team members and analyze all equipment and procedures. Ma'am, Zoe began, but Colonel Stone held up a hand. This isn't punishment, Sergeant. It's protocol. When missions fail, we investigate thoroughly to ensure it doesn't happen again. If the investigation clears you of any wrongdoing, you'll be reinstated to the team. As they filed out of the debriefing room, Zoe caught Cameron's arm. You know this wasn't my fault, she said quietly. Cameron avoided her gaze. I know the numbers were right, he said, but I also know I don't miss shots like that. Something went wrong, and until we figure out what, everyone's going to be asking questions. He walked away, leaving Zoe standing alone in the hallway. In the space of 24 hours, she'd gone from being a respected member of an elite sniper team to being the prime suspect in a mission failure that had cost them a high-value target and nearly gotten them killed. But as she made her way to the administrative offices, one thought kept echoing in her mind. She knew with absolute certainty that her calculations had been perfect, which meant either Cameron's shooting had suffered catastrophic failure, or there were variables at play that none of them understood yet. Either way, she was determined to find the truth, even if it meant challenging the assumptions of everyone who outranked her. 3 weeks into her administrative exile, Zoe Reeves had become a ghost, haunting the corridors of Forward Operating Base Phoenix. Her days were spent filing reports, updating equipment inventories, and enduring the pointed stares of soldiers who had heard whispered versions of what happened during the failed mission. The stories, she discovered, had taken on a life of their own. The first version she overheard was relatively benign. The spotter had made a calculation error that caused the primary sniper to miss his target. But as the days passed, the narrative grew more sinister. By the end of the first week, soldiers were whispering that she had deliberately sabotaged the mission because she was jealous of Cameron's position. By the second week, some were suggesting she had romantic feelings for Cameron that had clouded her judgment. By the third week, the story had morphed into something even more damaging, that she was fundamentally unfit for special operations and had been carried by her male teammates for months. Master Sergeant Tyler Brooks seemed to be the source of much of the speculation. During morning formations, he would make pointed comments about the importance of unit cohesion and ensuring all team members are focused on mission success rather than personal advancement. He never mentioned Zoe by name, but everyone understood who he was talking about. The breaking point came during a base-wide briefing on operational security. Brooks was presenting updates on recent missions when he clicked to a slide titled Lessons Learned from Recent Operations. The first bullet point read, Spotters must prioritize mission success over personal career goals. Zoe felt her face burn with humiliation as every head in the room turned to look at her. The message was crystal clear.
She was being used as an example of what not to do, a cautionary tale about the dangers of putting personal ambition ahead of team loyalty. But it was Cameron's reaction that hurt the most. He sat 3 rows ahead of her, staring straight forward, offering no defense or contradiction to Brooks's implications. The man she had spotted for on 17 successful missions, whose life she had helped save through precise calculations and steady nerves, was allowing her reputation to be destroyed without saying a word in her defense. After the briefing, Zoe cornered Cameron outside the communications building. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. Cameron glanced around nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of the confrontation. "Zoe, this isn't the time or place." "When is the time?" she interrupted. "When is the time for you to tell them the truth about what happened out there? When is the time for you to admit that my calculations were perfect and something else went wrong?" Cameron's jaw tightened. "You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to miss that shot? My entire career, my whole identity as a soldier is built on my ability to hit targets when it matters. Do you have any idea what it's like to have that questioned?" "Yes, actually, I do," she shot back, "because I'm living it right now. The difference is I'm being blamed for your failure." "My failure?" Cameron's voice rose, drawing stares from passing soldiers. "Maybe if you hadn't been so focused on proving you deserve sniper training, you would have double-checked your work more carefully." The accusation hit Zoe like a physical blow. This was Cameron, her partner, someone she had trusted with her life, now parroting the same unfounded suspicions that Brooks had been spreading. "I triple-checked everything," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "Range, wind, humidity, barometric pressure, even the angle of the sun and its effect on mirage patterns. Every calculation was verified through multiple methods. You know this because you were lying right next to me when I did it." Cameron looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "All I know is that I made a shot I've made hundreds of times before, and somehow it went wide. Something was wrong with the information I was given. Or something was wrong with the shooter." The words hung between them like a challenge. Cameron's face flushed red, and for a moment Zoe thought he might actually strike her. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Be very careful, Sergeant. You're already on thin ice around here. Start questioning my shooting ability, and you'll find yourself transferred to some supply depot in the middle of nowhere." Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Brooks already thinks you're a liability. Colonel Stone is considering your permanent removal from special operations. The only reason you're still here is because of your technical record, but that won't protect you if you start making enemies of the people who could have supported you. Cameron walked away, leaving Zoe standing alone outside the communications building. She realized with sinking clarity that she wasn't just fighting for her reputation anymore. She was fighting for her entire military career. The investigation that was supposed to clear her name had instead become a systematic destruction of her credibility. That evening, she called her sister Emma back in Colorado. It was the first time she'd reached out to family since the failed mission, and hearing Emma's familiar voice almost brought tears to her eyes. "Zoe, you sound terrible," Emma said after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "What's going on over there?" For a moment, Zoe considered telling her everything: the mission failure, the accusations, the isolation, the fear that her dreams of becoming a sniper were slipping away. Instead, she found herself saying, "Just work stress. Nothing I can't handle."
You know you can talk to me about anything, right? I may not understand military stuff, but I understand when my sister is hurting. After hanging up, Zoe sat alone in her small quarters, staring at the photos on her desk. Her graduation from basic training, her first day with the Special Operations Unit, the team photo from their most successful mission 6 months earlier. In that last photo, she was standing between Cameron and Brooks, all of them smiling with the confidence of soldiers who believed they were invincible. Now she was being systematically isolated and discredited by the very men who had once depended on her skills to keep them alive. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was being punished for a failure that wasn't hers by people who knew she wasn't responsible. But as she prepared for bed that night, Zoe made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to passively accept the destruction of her reputation. She wasn't going to let Brooks and Cameron rewrite history to protect their own careers at the expense of hers. If they wanted to question her abilities, she would give them something real to evaluate. She just needed to find the right opportunity to prove that their assumptions about her capabilities were as wrong as their accusations about her loyalty. The opportunity, she had no way of knowing, was already heading their way in the form of a mission briefing that would arrive the next morning. A briefing that would present a challenge so daunting that even the military's most experienced snipers would consider it nearly impossible.
The emergency briefing was called at 0600 hours, pulling every available sniper team from their regular duties to the main operations center. Zoe shouldn't have been there. Her administrative assignment technically excluded her from operational meetings, but Colonel Stone had specifically requested her presence. As she entered the briefing room, she could feel the weight of hostile stares from Brooks and several other team leaders who clearly questioned her right to be there. Cameron avoided her gaze entirely, focusing intently on his notebook, as if it contained the secrets of the universe. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Zoe took a seat in the back corner, away from the main group of snipers. Colonel Stone stood at the front of the room beside a large tactical display showing satellite imagery of a mountainous region along the Syrian-Turkish border. Her expression was grim as she began the briefing. Gentlemen and Sergeant Reeves, we have a situation that requires immediate action. 12 hours ago, intelligence confirmed the location of Hassan al-Rashid, the terrorist leader responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed over 200 coalition personnel in the past year. The room stirred with interest. Al-Rashid was one of the most wanted terrorist leaders in the region, a man whose death would significantly disrupt enemy operations and potentially save countless lives. The problem, Colonel Stone continued, is the location. Al-Rashid is holed up in a fortified compound built into the side of a mountain. The terrain makes conventional assault impossible, and airstrikes are not an option due to the presence of civilian hostages. She clicked to the next slide, showing detailed topographical maps and distance measurements. The only viable approach for a sniper shot is from this ridgeline here, designated Point Alpha. However, the distance from Point Alpha to the target building is 3,540 meters, just over 2 miles. A murmur ran through the room. Most military snipers were trained for effective ranges up to 1,000 meters, with exceptional shooters capable of accurate fire out to 1,500 meters under ideal conditions. A shot at over 2 miles was entering the realm of the nearly impossible. Master Sergeant Brooks was the first to speak. Colonel, with respect, that's beyond the effective range of any weapon system we have available. The longest confirmed kill shot in military history is 3,540 meters, achieved by a Canadian sniper using specialized equipment under perfect conditions. And that was a single, exceptional shot, not a precision strike on a specific individual. I'm aware of the challenges, Master Sergeant, Colonel Stone replied, which is why I'm opening this mission to volunteers only. No one will be ordered to attempt a shot at this range. It's simply too difficult and too dangerous. Zoe found herself studying the satellite imagery with growing fascination. The shot would indeed be extraordinarily challenging, not just because of the distance, but because of the environmental factors involved. The target elevation was significantly higher than the shooting position, requiring complex ballistic calculations. Wind patterns in mountainous terrain were notoriously unpredictable. The temperature differential between the valley floor and the mountain peak would affect bullet trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict. But as she analyzed the data, Zoe began to see patterns and possibilities that others might miss. Her background in mathematics and physics, combined with her obsessive attention to environmental details, suggested solutions to problems that would stump most snipers. Cameron raised his hand. "Colonel, what's the window for this shot?" Al-Rashid is scheduled to meet with his operational commanders tomorrow at 1400 hours. Intelligence indicates he'll be visible on the compound's main balcony for approximately 10 minutes. After that meeting, he's expected to relocate to a more secure facility deeper in enemy territory. This is likely our only opportunity. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They had less than 36 hours to plan and execute what might be the most difficult sniper shot ever attempted in combat conditions. Brooks cleared his throat. "Colonel, I recommend we send our most experienced long-range team. Sergeant Torres has the best track record for extended-range shots, and Actually, Cameron interrupted, his voice strained, I don't think I should be the primary shooter for this mission. Every head in the room turned toward him. Zoe could see the conflict playing out on his face, his professional pride warring with the psychological impact of his recent failure. Sergeant Torres, Colonel Stone said carefully, you're our most qualified long-range shooter. Your record speaks for itself. My record, Cameron said bitterly, includes a missed shot at 1,200 meters under optimal conditions. This mission is at nearly 3 times that distance under conditions that are anything but optimal. I don't think I'm the right person for this job. The admission hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Cameron Torres, the sniper who had built his reputation on confidence and precision, was publicly acknowledging that he no longer trusted his own abilities. Brooks looked like he'd been slapped. Sergeant, you're letting one operational setback? It's not just one setback, Cameron cut him off. Ever since that mission, every time I look through a scope, I second-guess myself. Every calculation, every environmental factor, every trigger pull. I'm questioning everything. That's not the mindset needed for a shot like this.
Colonel Stone studied Cameron's face for a long moment. If not you, then who? This mission requires our absolute best. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Zoe could feel her heart pounding as an impossible idea began to take shape in her mind. She thought about the months of discrimination, the accusations, the systematic destruction of her reputation. She thought about the calculations that had been perfect, the blame that had been unfairly placed on her shoulders, the dreams of sniper training that had been repeatedly denied. Before she could fully consider the consequences, Zoe stood up. Colonel, I volunteer for the mission. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Brooks shot to his feet. Absolutely not. Sergeant Reeves isn't even qualified for sniper duties, let alone a shot of this complexity. She's never fired a precision rifle in combat, another team leader added. This is insane. But Colonel Stone held up a hand for silence, her eyes focused intently on Zoe. Sergeant Reeves, you're not sniper qualified. You've never served as a primary shooter. What makes you think you can accomplish what even our most experienced snipers consider nearly impossible? Zoe took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either open the door to the opportunity of a lifetime or end her military career entirely. Because, Colonel, I've been studying long-range ballistics for 2 years, preparing for exactly this kind of challenge. I know the environmental factors better than anyone in this room. I've calculated shots at this range as theoretical exercises dozens of times. And most importantly, I'm not carrying the psychological baggage of a recent failure that might affect my confidence when it matters most. The room erupted in angry voices, but Zoe continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. Give me a chance to prove what I can do, and I'll take the shot that no one else believes is possible.
The silence that followed Zoe's declaration was deafening. Colonel Stone stared at her with an expression that was equal parts incredulous and intrigued, while Master Sergeant Brooks looked like he was about to have a stroke. The other snipers in the room exchanged glances that ranged from amused to outraged, as if they couldn't believe someone with Zoe's limited experience would even suggest attempting such a shot. Sergeant Reeves, Colonel Stone said slowly, do you understand what you're proposing? This isn't a training exercise or a theoretical problem. This is a combat mission where failure means a high-value target escapes, potentially costing dozens of lives down the road. I understand completely, ma'am, Zoe replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I also understand that, according to what I just heard, no one else in this room is confident they can make the shot either. Brooks slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. Colonel, we cannot seriously be considering sending an unqualified spotter on what may be the most challenging sniper mission ever attempted. Reeves has never even completed basic sniper school, let alone advanced long-range training. You're right, Zoe said, turning to face Brooks directly. I haven't completed formal sniper school, but I have something that formal training can't provide. An obsessive understanding of the mathematical and environmental factors that make long-range shooting possible. She moved to the tactical display, pointing to the satellite imagery. Look at this terrain.
The shooting position is at 2,100 meters elevation, target is at 2,850 meters. That's a 750-meter elevation difference over a horizontal distance of 3,400 meters. The angle of elevation is approximately 12.5 degrees, which means the bullet trajectory will be significantly affected by gravitational drop compensation. The room had grown quiet as Zoe continued her analysis. The shot will be taken during early afternoon hours when thermal currents in mountainous terrain are most unpredictable. Wind patterns will be channeled through 3 separate valley systems before reaching the target area, creating complex deflection patterns that can't be calculated using standard methods. Colonel Stone was listening intently now. Go on. But here's what makes the shot possible, she continued, her confidence growing. The target balcony is enclosed on 3 sides, creating a wind shadow that will reduce lateral deflection in the final 100 meters. The afternoon sun angle will create thermal updrafts along the mountain face that can be predicted and compensated for. And most importantly, intelligence indicates al-Rashid always positions himself in the same spot during these meetings, the southwest corner of the balcony, where he feels most protected. Cameron, who had been silent throughout her presentation, finally spoke up. Zoe, even if your calculations are perfect, you've never fired a long-range precision rifle. The physical demands alone, recoil management, follow-through, breath control under extreme stress, these aren't things you can learn from a textbook. You're absolutely right, Zoe acknowledged, which is why I'm not asking for the mission based on my current abilities. I'm asking for the chance to prove I can develop those abilities in the time we have available. Brooks laughed harshly. Develop them? Sergeant, elite snipers train for years to achieve the level of skill needed for shots half this distance. You want to master advanced long-range shooting in 36 hours? Not master it, execute it. Once, under conditions I've already calculated and prepared for mentally. I don't need to become the world's greatest sniper. I just need to make one perfect shot. Colonel Stone had been studying the tactical data while listening to the debate. Sergeant Reeves, assuming for a moment that we were to consider your proposal, what would you need to prepare for this mission? Zoe had been hoping for exactly this question. Ma'am, I would need access to the base's longest-range rifle system, preferably the Chi-Tech M200 intervention with match-grade ammunition. I would need detailed meteorological data from the target area, updated hourly until mission execution. And I would need a training partner who understands long-range shooting well enough to help me develop the physical techniques in the limited time available. And who exactly would serve as your training partner, since you've managed to alienate most of the qualified personnel on this base? Before Zoe could respond, a voice from the back of the room spoke up. I'll do it. Everyone turned to see Chief Warrant Officer Franklin Ghost Mitchell standing near the door. Mitchell was a legend in special operations circles, a sniper with over 30 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters and the closest thing to long-range shooting expert the base had available. Ghost, Colonel Stone said with surprise. I didn't know you were attending this briefing. I wasn't supposed to be, Mitchell replied, stepping into the room. I've been listening to this discussion with great interest.
He looked directly at Zoe. Sergeant Reeves, your technical analysis is the most comprehensive I've heard for a shot of this complexity. Your understanding of environmental factors is exceptional. But Sergeant Torres is correct. Technical knowledge alone won't be sufficient. Zoe felt her heart sink, thinking Mitchell was about to join the chorus of voices opposing her proposal. However, Mitchell continued, I've seen soldiers with natural shooting ability and poor technical knowledge fail at long-range shooting, while others with exceptional technical skills and adequate physical technique succeed beyond all expectations. The question isn't whether you're qualified by traditional standards. The question is whether you have the combination of skills, intelligence, and mental fortitude to execute under pressure. He paused, studying her face. I'm willing to spend the next 30 hours finding out. The room was absolutely silent. Ghost Mitchell's endorsement carried enormous weight. If he was willing to stake his reputation on training Zoe for this mission, it meant he saw something in her that others had missed. Colonel Stone looked around the room, taking in the expressions of shock, skepticism, and curiosity on the faces of her sniper teams. This is highly irregular, she said finally. Sergeant Reeves,
If I approve this, you understand that failure means more than just a missed shot. It means the potential death of innocent hostages and the escape of one of our highest priority targets. I understand, ma'am. And you understand that if you fail, it will likely end your military career and validate every criticism that's been made about your capabilities. Yes, ma'am. Colonel Stone was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that all carried significant risks. Finally, she made her decision. Chief Mitchell, you have 30 hours to prepare Sergeant Reeves for what may be the most difficult shot ever attempted in combat. If, at any point during that training, you determine she's not capable of executing the mission, I expect you to recommend we abort and find an alternative approach. She looked directly at Zoe. Sergeant Reeves, you have your chance to prove yourself. Don't waste it. As the briefing ended and personnel began filing out of the room, Zoe felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. She had just committed to attempting something that military experts considered nearly impossible, with only 30 hours to prepare for a shot that would either vindicate her completely or destroy her career forever. The impossible challenge had been accepted. Now came the hard part, proving she could actually deliver on her bold promises.
Chief Warrant Officer Franklin Ghost Mitchell's reputation preceded him wherever he went on Forward Operating Base Phoenix. At 42 years old, he was a quiet professional whose unassuming appearance, average height, graying temples, and wire-rimmed glasses disguised one of the most lethal long-range shooters in military history. His nickname had been earned not through any supernatural abilities, but through his uncanny talent for appearing and disappearing without detection, and for making shots that others swore were impossible. As the briefing room emptied, Mitchell approached Zoe with the measured pace of someone who never wasted energy on unnecessary movement. Sergeant Reeves, before we begin, I need to understand something. Why are you really doing this? Zoe was surprised by the directness of the question. She had expected him to start with technical assessments or physical evaluations, not psychological probing. Sir, I want to prove that I belong in special operations, that I'm capable of more than just spotting duties. Mitchell studied her face with the same intensity he imagined he used when evaluating targets through a rifle scope. That's what you want others to think. I'm asking what you really want. For a moment, Zoe considered giving him another politically correct answer about serving her country and contributing to mission success. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. I want to prove that everyone who's doubted me, everyone who's tried to convince me I'm not good enough, is wrong. I want to show that natural talent isn't the only path to excellence, that dedication and intelligence can overcome assumptions about what women can and can't do in combat roles. Mitchell nodded slowly. Good. Anger can be a powerful motivator if you learn to control it, rather than letting it control you. But understand something, Sergeant. This mission isn't about proving points or settling scores. Once you're behind that rifle, none of that matters. The only thing that exists is you, the target, and the physics of making an impossible shot possible. He gestured toward the door. We're going to start with something that might surprise you. We're not going to the range. 20 minutes later, Zoe found herself in the base's recreation center, standing in front of a pool table. Mitchell was arranging the balls in a precise triangle, his movements deliberate and exact. Sir, I don't understand how playing pool is going to help me with long-range shooting. Mitchell smiled, the first time Zoe had seen any expression on his usually stoic face. Sergeant, what's the most important factor in making a difficult shot? Accurate range estimation, wind calculation, proper scope adjustment? All important, but secondary to the most fundamental requirement, the ability to visualize the path from where you are to where you need the projectile to go, and then execute that visualization with precise physical movement.
He handed her a pool cue. Watch my stance, my grip, my breathing, the smoothness of my stroke. Pool is physics in its purest form. Angle of approach, energy transfer, friction coefficients, momentum conservation. Master the mental and physical discipline required to control these variables with a pool cue, and you'll understand the foundation of precision shooting. For the next 2 hours, Mitchell had Zoe practice shot after shot, not focusing on whether she made the balls in the pockets, but on the consistency of her stance, the smoothness of her stroke, and most importantly, her ability to visualize the exact path the cue ball would take before making contact. "Your technical knowledge is exceptional," he observed as she lined up a particularly challenging bank shot. "But technical knowledge without physical execution is just theory. Feel how your body moves. Notice how tension in your shoulders affects the smoothness of your stroke. Understand that precision shooting is as much about what you don't do as what you do." As the afternoon progressed, Zoe began to understand Mitchell's teaching method. Every aspect of pool, the importance of follow-through, the necessity of consistent body position, the way breathing affected fine motor control, directly translated to rifle shooting fundamentals. "Now," said Mitchell, as they prepared to leave the recreation center, "tell me about the Chayatek M200. Zoe's eyes lit up. She had been studying the rifle system for months, fascinated by its capability to deliver precision fire at extreme ranges. The Chayatek M200 intervention is a bolt-action rifle chambered in .408 Chayatek, specifically designed for long-range precision shooting. Effective range exceeds 2,500 meters with match-grade ammunition. The .408 Chayatek cartridge maintains supersonic velocity beyond 2,000 meters, providing superior ballistic performance compared to standard .50 caliber rounds. Good. What about the scope system? Nightforce NXS 5.5 by 22 by 56 mm scope with mil-dot reticle mounted on a Picatinny rail system that allows for precise adjustment and repeatability. The scope provides both first focal plane reticle scaling and side focus parallax adjustment, critical for accurate range estimation and target acquisition at extreme distances. Mitchell was clearly impressed by her technical knowledge. "Have you ever actually fired the system?" "No, sir. I've only studied the specifications and ballistic data." "Then we're about to change that. But first, I need to understand your physical limitations and capabilities."
They spent the next hour in the base gymnasium, where Mitchell put Zoe through a series of exercises designed to test her core strength, breath control, and fine motor skills under stress. She held shooting positions for extended periods while he monitored her breathing patterns and muscle tremors. She performed precision tasks while her heart rate was elevated, testing her ability to maintain steady hands under physical stress. "Your physical conditioning is better than I expected," Mitchell observed as they concluded the assessment. "Your breathing control is excellent, and you have natural steadiness in your hands. But we need to address one critical factor: recoil management." He explained that the Chayatek M200, while engineered to minimize felt recoil through its muzzle brake and stock design, still delivered a substantial punch that could throw off inexperienced shooters. "The key isn't fighting the recoil, but flowing with it while maintaining sight picture and follow-through." As evening approached, they finally made their way to the base's long-range shooting facility. The range was equipped with targets at distances up to 1,500 meters, far short of their mission requirement, but sufficient for initial training. Mitchell retrieved the Chayatek M200 from the armory, handling the precision rifle with the reverence of someone who understood its capabilities. This weapon system represents the pinnacle of current long-range shooting technology. In the right hands, it's capable of delivering precision fire at distances that most people would consider impossible. He handed the rifle to Zoe, watching her reaction as she felt its weight and balance for the first time. The Chayatek was heavier than the M16 she was accustomed to, but it felt solid and purposeful in her hands.
Tomorrow morning, we begin live fire training. We'll start at 800 meters and work our way out to the maximum range this facility allows. But tonight, I want you to familiarize yourself with every component of the system. Field strip it, reassemble it, learn how every adjustment affects performance. As they prepared to leave the range, Mitchell turned to Zoe with a serious expression. Sergeant, I want you to understand something. I've trained dozens of snipers over my career, and I've seen natural shooters fail because they lacked discipline, and dedicated students succeed beyond all expectations because they refused to quit. He paused, looking out across the desert landscape that surrounded the base. What we're attempting tomorrow is at the very edge of what's physically possible. Success will require perfect execution of every variable we can control and the mental fortitude to perform under pressure that most people can't imagine. Are you saying you think I can do it, sir? Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. I'm saying that after watching you today, I believe you have the potential to do it. Whether you actually succeed will depend on how well you can transform that potential into performance when everything is on the line. As Zoe walked back to her quarters that evening, carrying the disassembled SheTac components, she felt something she hadn't experienced since before the failed mission: genuine hope. In Ghost Mitchell, she had found not just a trainer, but someone who saw her potential rather than her limitations. The real work would begin tomorrow.
The alarm rang at 04:30 hours, but Zoe was already awake. She had spent most of the night disassembling and reassembling the SheTac M200, learning every component until she could perform the process blindfolded. Her fingers had memorized the feel of each part: the smooth bolt action, the precisely machined receiver, the complex mechanics of the scope mounting system. By morning, the rifle felt less like an unfamiliar tool and more like an extension of her own body. Chief Mitchell was waiting for her at the range as the first hints of dawn painted the desert sky orange and pink. He had arrived even earlier, setting up targets at multiple distances and checking environmental monitoring equipment that would provide real-time data on wind, temperature, and atmospheric pressure. "How did you sleep?" he asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "I didn't, sir. I spent the night studying the rifle system." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Good! Familiarity with your weapon is crucial, but now we need to move beyond theoretical knowledge to practical application." He gestured toward the firing line where the SheTac was already set up on a precision bipod system. "We're going to start at 800 meters. That's roughly twice the range of most military sniper training, but less than a quarter of your mission distance." Zoe approached the rifle with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Through her months of theoretical study, she had calculated hundreds of shots at various distances, but she had never actually fired a precision rifle in anger. The SheTac looked massive compared to the M16 she was accustomed to, its sleek lines and advanced optics speaking to capabilities she was only beginning to understand. "First, we establish your natural point of aim. Your body needs to be aligned so that the rifle naturally points toward the target without muscular tension. Fighting your natural alignment will cause inconsistencies that become magnified over long distances." For the next hour, Mitchell worked with Zoe on fundamental shooting positions: prone supported, prone unsupported, and sitting. Each position required subtle adjustments to account for the SheTac's size and weight. Unlike the quick target acquisition she was used to with assault rifles, precision shooting demanded deliberate, almost meditative movements. "Breathing is everything," Mitchell explained as he watched her settle behind the scope. "At 800 meters, the movement of your chest rising and falling can shift your point of impact by several inches. At our mission distance, that same movement could mean missing the target entirely." Zoe learned to fire during her natural respiratory pause, the brief moment between exhaling and inhaling when her body was most stable. It felt unnatural at first, forcing her to synchronize her shot timing with her body's rhythms rather than simply pulling the trigger when she felt ready. The first shot was a revelation. The SheTac's report was different from any weapon she had fired before, a sharp crack that seemed to split the morning air. The recoil, while substantial, was manageable thanks to the rifle's design and Mitchell's coaching on body position. Through the scope, she watched as the bullet struck the target low and to the left of center.
Good first shot, Mitchell observed, studying the impact through spotting scope. Your fundamentals are solid, but we need to adjust for several factors. At this distance, you're seeing the effects of bullet drop, wind drift, and scope adjustment errors that are barely noticeable at shorter ranges. Over the next 4 hours, they worked systematically through the challenges of long-range shooting. Mitchell taught her to read environmental conditions not just through instruments, but through visual cues. The way heat waves shimmered off the desert floor, how wind affected vegetation at different distances, the subtle changes in air density that could affect bullet trajectory. Most shooters rely too heavily on ballistic computers and weather stations, Mitchell explained as Zoe prepared for another shot. Technology is useful, but it can't account for microclimates, thermal currents, or the hundreds small variables that exist between your position and the target. You need to develop intuition based on observation and experience. By mid-morning, Zoe was consistently hitting the 800-meter target within a 6-inch group. Respectable accuracy for someone with her limited experience, but far from the precision required for their mission. Mitchell seemed pleased with her progress, but emphasized the enormous gap between current performance and mission requirements. We're moving to 1,200 meters, he announced, directing her attention to a target that appeared as little more than a speck through the rifle scope. This is where things get interesting. At 1,200 meters, every small error in technique became magnified dramatically. A slight tremor in her hands shifted the point of impact by inches. Inconsistent breathing moved shots vertically across the target. Most challenging of all, the time of flight increased to over 2 seconds, meaning environmental conditions could change between trigger pull and bullet impact. This is why Cameron missed his shot, Zoe realized aloud after a particularly frustrating string of near misses. It wasn't calculation errors or equipment failure. It was the psychological pressure of knowing that every tiny mistake gets amplified.
Mitchell lowered his spotting scope and looked at her directly. Now you're beginning to understand. Long-range shooting isn't just about technical skill. It's about mental discipline under pressure. The difference between a good shot and a great shot isn't physical ability, it's the mental fortitude to execute perfect technique when everything is on the line. As the afternoon wore on, Zoe's accuracy at 1,200 meters gradually improved. Her groups tightened from 18 inches to 12 inches to 8 inches. Not perfect, but demonstrating steady progress and an understanding of the complex variables involved. We need to address something critical, Mitchell said as they prepared for the final shooting session of the day. Your mission tomorrow will require a shot at nearly 3 times this distance, under conditions far more challenging than this controlled environment. The mathematical progression isn't linear. A shot at 3,500 meters isn't just 3 times harder than 1,200 meters, it's exponentially more difficult. He showed her ballistic charts that illustrated the point. At their mission distance, bullet drop would measure in dozens of feet rather than inches. Wind drift could move the impact point several yards laterally. Time of flight would exceed 4 seconds, during which the target could move significantly. Sir, Zoe said, studying the data with growing concern, these numbers suggest that even perfect technique might not be enough. The variables are so extreme that success becomes as much about luck as skill. You're absolutely right, Mitchell agreed. Which is why we're not going to rely on conventional techniques. Tomorrow morning, we're going to work with specialized equipment and advanced calculations that push the boundaries of what's currently possible in military sniping. As they cleaned and secured the Chi-Tech system, Mitchell outlined their plan for the remaining training time. Tonight, you'll study advanced ballistic software and weather prediction models. Tomorrow, we'll use the maximum range of this facility, 1,500 meters, to test theoretical calculations against actual performance. And then, we'll use mathematical modeling to extrapolate those results to mission distance. Will that be enough preparation? Mitchell was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun set over the desert mountains. Sergeant, what we're attempting has never been done under combat conditions. We're combining cutting-edge technology with theoretical calculations and hoping that 18 hours of intensive training can substitute for years of specialized experience. He turned to face her directly. Will it be enough? I don't know,
But I do know that your technical understanding is exceptional, your learning curve is remarkable, and your determination is absolute. If anyone can succeed at this mission with limited preparation time, it's you." As they walked back toward the base facilities, Zoe felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. In less than 24 hours, she would attempt something that military experts considered nearly impossible. Her preparation time was running out, and tomorrow would determine whether her bold confidence had been justified or catastrophically misplaced. The real test was still ahead.
Zoe spent the evening in the base's communications center, hunched over a computer terminal running advanced ballistic modeling software that few soldiers even knew existed. The program, originally developed for artillery calculations, could process hundreds of environmental variables simultaneously to predict bullet trajectory with mathematical precision that bordered on the supernatural. Chief Mitchell sat beside her, guiding her through the complex interface while explaining the theoretical foundations that made such calculations possible. This software was designed for indirect fire missions where targets are beyond visual range, he explained. We're adapting it for direct fire at distances that push the envelope of what's considered possible. The numbers on the screen were staggering. At 3,540 meters, the .408 Chaitak bullet would drop over 90 feet from its initial trajectory. Flight time would be 4.2 seconds under ideal conditions, during which crosswinds could deflect the bullet several yards laterally. Even more challenging, the bullet would slow from its initial velocity of 3,200 feet per second to just under 1,400 feet per second by the time it reached the target. Still supersonic, but with dramatically reduced energy and stability. The key insight, Mitchell continued, inputting atmospheric data from the target area, is that we're not really shooting at a target 3,540 meters away. We're shooting at where that target will be 4.2 seconds in the future, accounting for his movement, wind patterns, temperature variations, and a dozen other factors that will exist at the moment of impact. Zoe studied the trajectory calculations with fascination and growing dread. The mathematical precision required was beyond anything she had previously contemplated. "Sir, these calculations assume we have perfect environmental data. What happens if our weather information is off by even small amounts?" Mitchell pulled up a sensitivity analysis that showed how small errors in input data affected final accuracy. A 5-degree temperature error would shift impact point by 18 inches. A 2-mile-per-hour wind miscalculation would move the bullet 3 feet laterally. A 1% error in relative humidity would affect bullet trajectory by over a foot at their mission distance. "This is why conventional sniper training doesn't prepare soldiers for shots at this range," Mitchell said grimly. "The margin for error becomes so small that success requires not just perfect execution, but perfect environmental data and perfect mathematical modeling." They worked until well after midnight, building a comprehensive firing solution that accounted for every variable they could identify or predict. The final calculation filled 3 pages of detailed adjustments: scope elevation, windage compensation, temperature corrections, and timing factors that would determine success or failure. At 0500 hours, they returned to the range for their final training session. Mitchell had arranged for access to the base's most advanced meteorological equipment, including Doppler wind measurement systems that could provide real-time atmospheric data with unprecedented accuracy. "Today we test our theoretical calculations against reality," Mitchell announced as they prepared the Chaitak system. "We'll shoot at maximum range, 1,500 meters, using the same mathematical models we'll employ tomorrow. If our calculations are accurate at this distance, we can extrapolate them to mission range with reasonable confidence." The 1,500-meter target was barely visible through the rifle scope, appearing as a small geometric shape against the desert background. At this distance, Zoe would be shooting beyond the effective range of most military sniper systems into territory normally reserved for specialized long-range competition rifles. "Environmental conditions are optimal," Mitchell observed, checking multiple instruments. "Wind speed 2 miles per hour, temperature 78 degrees, humidity 35%. These are about as perfect as conditions get for precision shooting." Zoe settled behind the Chaitak, running through her mental checklist with the systematic precision that had become second nature over the past day. Natural point of aim, breathing control, sight picture, trigger manipulation.
each element had to be perfect for success at this range. The first shot felt different from anything she had experienced during previous training. The bullet's flight time stretched to nearly 3 seconds, long enough for her to maintain sight picture and actually watch the trace of the projectile's path through the scope. When the bullet finally impacted, it struck within 6 inches of the calculated point of impact. "Outstanding," Mitchell said, his voice carrying genuine admiration. "Your theoretical calculations just proved themselves against reality." That level of accuracy at 1,500 meters suggests our mathematical modeling is sound. Over the next 3 hours, they fired a carefully planned series of shots designed to test their calculations under varying conditions. They adjusted for simulated wind patterns, temperature changes, and atmospheric pressure variations that might exist during the actual mission. Each shot provided data points that validated or refined their mathematical models. The results were both encouraging and sobering. Under optimal conditions with perfect environmental data, Zoe could consistently place shots in an 8-inch circle at 1,500 meters. Extrapolated to mission distance, that suggested potential accuracy within a 3-foot circle. More than sufficient for our purposes, but only if everything went perfectly. "Now we address the elephant in the room," Mitchell said as they prepared for the final phase of training. Target movement.
Intelligence reports indicated that al-Rashid would be visible on the balcony for approximately 10 minutes, but would be moving within that confined space rather than remaining stationary. The challenge was timing the shot for a moment when the target would be in a predictable position. "Watch this," Mitchell said, setting up a simulation using moving targets at 1,000 meters. At our mission distance, the target could move 12 feet during bullet flight time. Your job is to identify the moment when his position becomes predictable enough to ensure impact. The simulation was revealing and terrifying. Even at 1,000 meters, leading a moving target required split-second timing and intuitive understanding of human movement patterns. At mission distance, the challenge would be exponentially more difficult. "There's one advantage we haven't discussed," Mitchell said as they analyzed the simulation results. "Al-Rashid follows predictable patterns during these meetings. Intelligence indicates he always moves to the same position, the southwest corner of the balcony, when discussing operational details. If we time our shot for that moment, we eliminate the variable of target movement." As the afternoon training session concluded, Zoe felt a mixture of confidence and apprehension that she had never experienced before. Her technical preparation was as thorough as time allowed. Her understanding of the mathematical and environmental factors was comprehensive. Her shooting skills, while still developing, had improved dramatically in just 2 days. But tomorrow's mission would test more than technical competence or shooting ability. It would test her capacity to perform under pressure that few soldiers ever experience. The knowledge that hundreds of lives might depend on a single trigger pull, executed under conditions that pushed the boundaries of human capability and mechanical precision. "Are you ready?" Mitchell asked as they secured the equipment for the final time. Zoe looked out across the desert landscape toward the mountains where tomorrow's mission would unfold. "Sir, I'm as ready as 18 hours of preparation can make me. Whether that's enough, we'll find out tomorrow." Mitchell nodded, his expression reflecting the same mixture of confidence and uncertainty that Zoe felt. They had done everything possible to prepare for an impossible shot. Tomorrow would determine whether their preparation had been sufficient or whether they had been attempting something that truly lay beyond the realm of human achievement. The moment of truth was less than 12 hours away. The helicopter insertion at 0800 hours was uneventful, but Zoe could feel the weight of scrutiny from every member of the mission team. Colonel Stone had insisted on a full tactical support package, 2 additional sniper teams for Overwatch, a communication specialist, and a forward observer with laser range-finding equipment. What should have been a standard 2-person sniper mission had become a small-scale operation with 8 personnel, all focused on supporting what many still considered an impossible shot. Cameron Torres was part of the Overwatch team, positioned 500 meters to Zoe's left with his own rifle system. He had volunteered for the mission, despite the obvious psychological difficulty of watching someone else attempt what he had been unable to do. As they moved into position, he caught Zoe's eye and nodded,
a gesture that carried more weight than any spoken words of encouragement. The shooting position at Point Alpha was everything the satellite imagery had suggested, and worse. A rocky outcropping barely large enough for two people, with limited concealment and exposure to wind patterns that channeled through the valley system below. Chief Mitchell immediately began setting up environmental monitoring equipment, while Zoe established her shooting position and began the delicate process of range verification. Range confirmed at 3,542 meters, reported the forward observer, his laser system providing measurement accuracy to within 1 meter. Target building bearing 127 degrees, elevation angle 12.7 degrees. The numbers matched their calculations almost exactly, a small victory that provided confidence in their mathematical modeling. Through the Chi-Tac's powerful scope, Zoe could see the balcony where Al-Rashid would appear in 5 hours and 37 minutes. It looked impossibly small and distant, a tiny rectangle of concrete and shadow that represented the culmination of months of preparation and a lifetime of determination. Environmental conditions are within acceptable parameters, Mitchell reported, monitoring wind speed, direction, temperature, and humidity through multiple instruments. We have light variable winds at shooting position, stronger and more consistent winds in the valley, and thermal updrafts along the target mountain face. Everything is behaving as predicted. The waiting began, perhaps the most psychologically challenging aspect of the entire mission. For the next 5 hours, they would monitor conditions, refine calculations, and maintain readiness while fighting the mental pressure that could destroy concentration and confidence. At 1100 hours, word came through the communication system that changed everything. Viper Team, this is Overwatch. Intelligence update. Target meeting has been moved up. Al-Rashid will be visible in 30 minutes, not 5 hours. Repeat, your window opens in 30 minutes. Zoe felt her heart rate spike as the timeline compressed from hours to minutes. All their careful preparation, all their environmental monitoring and calculation refinement suddenly had to be executed under the pressure of immediate action. Mitchell to Reeves, came Ghost's calm voice through her earpiece. Nothing changes except timing. Our calculations are solid, environmental conditions are stable, and you've trained for exactly this scenario. Trust your preparation. Through the scope, Zoe could see increased activity around the target building. Vehicles were arriving, security personnel were taking positions, and the meeting that intelligence had predicted was clearly about to begin. In less than 30 minutes, Hassan al-Rashid would step onto that balcony, 3,542 meters away, and she would have perhaps 10 minutes to execute the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. Range and environmental data locked, Mitchell announced, feeding final calculations into the ballistic computer. Scope adjustments are 47.3 mils elevation, 2.1 mils left windage, time of flight 4.23 seconds. Target zone wind estimated at 3.7 miles per hour from the northeast. Zoe made the scope adjustments with deliberate precision, each click of the turrets representing calculations that had consumed hours of preparation. The mathematical foundation of the shot was as solid as human knowledge and technology could make it. Now it came down to execution under pressure that she had never experienced. Viper Team, this is intelligence. Target is on site and moving toward the balcony. Estimate 5 minutes to visual contact. The communication crackled through multiple radios, alerting every member of the support team that the moment they had all been preparing for was imminent. Zoe could hear the controlled breathing of the forward observer beside her, sense the tension radiating from Mitchell as he made final environmental calculations. Target visual, came Cameron's voice from the Overwatch position. Adult male matching description, moving onto balcony with 3 companions. Distance appears consistent with range estimates. Through her scope, Zoe could see movement on the distant balcony. Figures that appeared as tiny specks to the naked eye resolved into recognizable human shapes through the high-powered optics. One figure, taller than the others, wearing traditional robes, positioned at the southwest corner exactly as intelligence had predicted, matched perfectly with photographic identification of Hassan al-Rashid. Positive identification confirmed, Mitchell announced after studying the target through his spotting scope. Primary target is in position. Secondary targets are maintaining distance. You have a clear shot.
Zoe settled behind the Chi-Tac, running through her final mental checklist. Natural point of aim, confirmed. Breathing, controlled and steady. Sight picture perfect, with the target centered in the crosshairs. Environmental calculations verified and scope adjustments locked. The rifle felt like an extension of her own body, every component familiar and trusted. Target is stationary, came the forward observer's voice. Wind conditions stable. You are cleared to engage. The weight of the moment pressed down on Zoe like a physical force. Everything she had trained for, everything she had endured over the past months, everything she had dreamed of achieving in her military career came down to the next few seconds. The target was in position. The calculations were perfect. The conditions were optimal. She controlled her breathing, finding that natural respiratory pause that Mitchell had taught her to recognize.
Her finger moved to the trigger, applying the gradual pressure that would release 3,200 feet per second of precisely calculated physics toward a target over 2 miles away. "Sending," she whispered into her microphone, the sniper's traditional announcement that the shot was being fired. The Cheetah bucked against her shoulder with massive recoil, but Zoe maintained her sight picture, watching through the scope as her bullet began its 4.23-second journey across the Syrian desert. The report echoed off the surrounding mountains, announcing to every hostile force in the area that someone had just fired a high-powered rifle from Point Alpha. For 4.23 seconds that felt like an eternity, 8 members of an elite military team held their breath and watched through various optical devices as a single bullet traveled a distance that challenged the very limits of human capability and mechanical precision. The impact when it came was visible through multiple scopes simultaneously. A small puff of concrete dust marked where the bullet struck the balcony's southwest corner, exactly where Hassan al-Rashid had been standing moments before. "Target down," Cameron's voice came through the radio, professional and controlled, despite the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. "Confirmed hit. Primary target is down and non-responsive." The longest confirmed kill shot in military history had just been achieved by a soldier who 3 days earlier had been assigned to administrative duties for allegedly sabotaging a mission. The impossible had become reality through a combination of mathematical precision, technological capability, and human determination that few people would ever fully understand. But even as celebration began to ripple through the support team's communications, Zoe knew that the hardest part of the mission was still ahead, getting off the mountain alive before every hostile force in the region converged on their position.
The extraction from Point Alpha was harrowing but successful. Within minutes of the shot, hostile forces began converging on their position from multiple directions, forcing the team to execute a running firefight down the mountainside to reach their pickup zone. But as they bounded from cover to cover under enemy fire, Zoe felt a calm confidence she had never experienced before. The impossible shot had been made. The mission was complete, and whatever challenges lay ahead seemed manageable compared to what she had already accomplished. The helicopter ride back to Forward Operating Base Phoenix was surreal. Cameron Torres, who had provided overwatch during the mission, sat across from her with an expression of genuine admiration mixed with something that looked like relief. "Zoe," he said over the rotor noise, "I owe you an apology. And more than that, I owe you my respect." Chief Mitchell, normally stoic and reserved, was reviewing the mission video footage with unconcealed satisfaction. "Sergeant Reeves, what you accomplished today will be studied in military schools for decades. The combination of mathematical precision, technological application, and pure shooting skill represents a new benchmark for what's possible in long-range precision fire." But it was the radio message they received halfway back to base that truly marked the magnitude of what had been achieved. "Viper Team, this is Command. Preliminary assessment confirms elimination of primary target. Intelligence estimates this action will disrupt enemy operations for months and potentially save hundreds of coalition lives. Outstanding work." The debriefing at Forward Operating Base Phoenix was unlike anything Zoe had experienced in her military career. Colonel Stone, who had authorized the mission with obvious reluctance, now looked at her with the respect reserved for soldiers who accomplish the extraordinary under impossible conditions. "Sergeant Reeves," the colonel began, "I want to formally acknowledge that my initial skepticism about your capabilities was unfounded. What you accomplished today goes beyond tactical success. It represents a fundamental challenge to assumptions about what's possible in military operations." Master Sergeant Brooks, who had spent weeks questioning Zoe's competence and reliability, sat in uncomfortable silence as the mission details were reviewed. The evidence was incontrovertible. The soldier he had dismissed as unfit for special operations had just achieved something that military experts would have considered impossible. "The ballistic analysis is extraordinary," reported the base's technical intelligence officer. "Shot angle, environmental compensation, and precision execution
all indicate mastery of long-range shooting principles that typically require years of specialized training. The mathematical modeling alone represents a new approach to extreme distance precision fire. Word of the successful mission spread through the base with remarkable speed. Soldiers who had whispered about Zoe's supposed failures now spoke of her achievement with awe and respect. The transformation in their attitude was complete and immediate. She had moved from being a cautionary tale to being a legend in the space of a single trigger pull. 3 days after the mission, Zoe received orders that would change the trajectory of her entire military career. She was being transferred to the Army's sniper school at Fort Benning, Georgia, not as a student, but as an instructor specializing in extreme range shooting and advanced ballistic calculations. The Army wants you to develop curriculum for long-range precision fire beyond current training standards. Colonel Stone explained during their final meeting, "Your combination of mathematical expertise and proven combat performance makes you uniquely qualified to advance the state-of-the-art in military sniping." But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Cameron Torres approached her on her final evening at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, carrying a small wooden box. "This belonged to my grandfather. He was a sniper in World War II, and these tools helped him make shots that saved his unit more times than he could count. I want you to have them." Zoe was speechless. The gesture represented not just an apology for his previous behavior, but acknowledgement that she had achieved something worthy of respect from the military sniper community. "Cameron, I can't accept this. It belongs in your family." "It belongs with someone who understands what precision shooting really means. Someone who proved that excellence isn't about natural talent or inherited ability. It's about dedication, intelligence, and the courage to attempt the impossible when lives depend on it." 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Zoe Reeves stood before her first class of advanced sniper students at Fort Benning, Georgia. The classroom was filled with experienced marksmen from elite units across the military, all there to learn techniques that pushed beyond traditional training boundaries. "6 months ago," she began, "I was a spotter who couldn't get approval for basic sniper training. I was told that women don't have the physical capabilities for precision shooting, that my role should be limited to supporting others rather than taking point position." She clicked to her first slide, showing the satellite imagery of the mountain where her record-setting shot had been achieved. "This is the story of how I learned that our greatest limitations are often the ones we accept, rather than the ones that actually exist."
As she spoke, Zoe could see the skeptical faces in the audience gradually transform into expressions of interest and respect. She thought about her sister Emma back in Colorado, who had called her a hero when the story finally became public. She thought about Master Sergeant Brooks, who had quietly submitted a commendation recommending her for promotion. Most of all, she thought about the scared, self-doubting soldier she had been and the confident instructor she had become. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, and it hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step, every moment of doubt, every challenge that had seemed insurmountable. The longest confirmed kill shot in military history was now officially attributed to Staff Sergeant Zoe Reeves, but she knew the real victory wasn't the record itself. The real victory was proving that with enough determination, proper preparation, and the courage to attempt the impossible, any soldier could achieve extraordinary things. Her story became more than just a tale of military success. It became a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of mentorship, and the truth that potential exists in places where others might never think to look. The sniper who had missed his shot had inadvertently created the opportunity for someone else to achieve the impossible, and in doing so, both had learned lessons about capability, determination, and the unpredictable nature of human potential that would stay with them for the rest of their military careers. Staff Sergeant Zoe Reeves had taken the shot from 2 miles further back and, in the process, had proven that sometimes the most unlikely person becomes the hero when everything is on the line.